welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Corey Fonville Foster, and today we have a different type of topic. Most of the time, I bring you people who do mostly marketing or sales, and they focus on small business owners. But today, we have a cool topic that I think will interest a lot of you as well. So, joining me today on our podcast is Dr. Jennifer Harrison, and she is a dissertation coach. Now, you may be wondering, why on earth did I bring a dissertation coach on the podcast that focuses on small business owners? Well, one, I work with a lot of ed consultants who have higher degrees and who want to know how to leverage those degrees, right? You don't spend all that money for nothing to get all that education just to leave it by the wayside when you go into entrepreneurship. So today we'll be tackling one, how to get through that dissertation, but also how to then leverage it to grow your small business. So let's join Jennifer to the podcast. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I'm so excited that you are here because I have had a lot of clients on consultation calls telling me like, hey, I would love to work with you, but I'm in the midst of my dissertation. A lot of my clients are going to get those higher degrees, and it's hard to balance that and try to build a business. So today we'll be talking about that. But before we dive in, I always like to give my guests an opportunity just to reintroduce themselves to our audience and let us know a little bit about how you got into business.
Sure. My name is Dr. Jen Harrison, as you said, and I'm a dissertation coach. I have worked in education for as long as I can remember. I got my degree in the UK and I taught in the UK for a while. I earned a secondary school teaching degree in the UK. And after my kids were born, we decided we were going to move back to the United States. And so I taught in my local state college for a few years. And then after the pandemic hit, I realized that there were a lot of students who were struggling and who needed more help than they were getting. And that was the point at which I decided to start the dissertation coaching business. So I've been doing that for a good 3 years now.
Awesome. Now, let's preface this conversation with knowing that I do not have a doctorate degree in anything except life. But like I said, I have encountered many clients who either want that for themselves, because I think some people think because you have a business, you can't want to grow in the traditional sense of whether it be in academics or career wise. A lot of people will have their, corporate job or 9-to-5 job and have a thriving business because they both give them fulfillment. And so what I find is they get a little stuck when they get to that dissertation part because it is a hard process. It's a long process. It's a challenging process. So for those people who may be listening and they're like, what's the big deal? Can you explain a little bit about like what is the process from what are you guys going from like your bachelor's to your doctoral degree, right?
So usually people do a bachelor's and then a master's, and then they'll move into a doctoral degree after that.
Wow.
So both the master's and the doctoral degree are considered grad studies after your undergraduate degree.
Wow, look, we already learned something new. So what is the process like? What are the elements that go into completing that doctoral degree?
So what you're going to have to do is you have to think of a topic. So that's challenge number one. You've got to have something that you actually want to investigate. And it's not enough to just be interested in a general topic, like a vague topic, like Black women in business or solving environmental crisis. Like it's got to be something really specific that focuses on a specific population and group of people and a problem that they are having that you want to help address. So that's the first thing. You come up with your topic. Usually at that point, what you then need to do is find another academic who's willing to work with you and supervise your work and kind of guide you along the way. And they will hopefully agree that they like your topic, they think it has merit, and they're happy to work with you. And usually you have to find a few other people as well. You put together what's known as a dissertation committee. And that committee is going to kind of guide your work all the way through, and then they'll be the ones that assess your work at the end and tell you, yes, you can be a doctor now. Once you've done that bit, you then usually, and this can vary from institution to institution, but you usually then have to do what's known as the proposal, which is the first 3 chapters of the document that everyone recognizes, the dissertation document. And that introduces what you're going to do. It sets out the methods, so exactly how you're going to do that. And it provides a literature review, which examines all the work that has been done on that topic and that problem previously and shows that there's a real need for your work to be done. Once you've done those first 3 chapters, you've done that proposal, you'll have to present it to your committee in a formal assessed presentation. And they will either approve it or they'll say, no, you need to do more work before we think this is a viable study. So kind of that's usually the first hurdle that students come up against, getting those first 3 chapters written and a study design that's actually going to be approved. And then
Wow.
it's approved, you've got to get what's known as IRB approval, which is IRB looks at the human ethics of your study, so making sure that you're not going to harm any human subjects. And once you have the proposal approved and the IRB approval, then you're able to go ahead and collect all your data. So you collect your data, which usually takes a little while, and then you have to analyze your data. And once you've done those 2 things, you're able to write the final 2 chapters of the dissertation. And at that point, you then present the whole thing again, including your results, including your findings, and your committee will decide whether or not you pass and become a doctor or whether you need to go back and do more work.
Wow, like that's quite a process.
It is.
But it's funny because when you were talking, I was like, that sounds like a lot of the elements of starting a business
Oh, yes.
because you have to, come up with an idea. You said, come up with a topic, and then you have to do research, right? You have to see if that idea is going to actually be something that's going to be fruitful, that people want, that people care about. Same thing through dissertation, finding a topic that one, your committee's going to like, but also that you can kind of get through that whole process. I love it because we have to do market research on our side. And then you said put together those first 2 chapters. That sounds like a business plan to me. So
Yeah.
I love that these things kind of coincide. I don't know about, because again, I haven't gone through the process, but I know as I dealt with just starting a business, those are some of the most stressful parts, just those initial steps,
Yeah.
because you didn't have any proof of concept yet. You were like, well, I hope this works out. So can I ask, when people go through that first stage of writing those first 3 chapters and presenting it formally, like what are the likelihood that the committee will say like, nah, this ain't gonna work, go back, try this again? Does that happen often, or is that like very rare?
It's very rare for them at that stage to just say, this is complete garbage, like you're done, get out of our program. But it is pretty common, I'd say probably maybe like 50% for them to say, this doesn't work, it isn't ready, like this needs more work, you've got to keep working on it, make this more polished and come back with it again. So, I guess
Wow.
like it's not like a Shark Tank where they're just going to be like, no, you're out. But there is definitely a lot of frustration at that stage when you keep saying, "Am I ready yet?" and they keep saying, "No, no, you're not ready yet."
So what is the usual, and I know it may vary based on the institution, but what is the usual length of this whole process from like idea to you're now a doctor?
Oh my goodness! So this can vary a lot. So usually there's a good 2 years or more of just taking courses and doing coursework before you even get to this dissertation stage, and then the hope is that you would complete this whole process within about a year, but typically students do take longer than that. So I've heard the upper limit be something more like 6 years.
Wow.
I've known people come to me who have taken a lot of that time and not gotten anywhere, and then said, I need to, I'm running out of time now. I need to get this done within the next 2 months, and we've managed to get it done. So it can vary a lot. It depends on, whether you're a full-time student or a part-time student. Are you trying to do a job or be a parent at the same time? How much time are you able to give to this thing each day?
Wow, makes sense. And again, it relates back to business because I think as a coach, that's often what I'm asking people because people want this number. They're like, well, how long will it take to get to this goal? And it's like, well, truthfully, if you have, 40 hours a week to put towards it, we can get there a lot faster than if you have 10 hours a week to put towards it. And I think the same thing goes true when you're talking about, this dissertation process because it sounds like it's tons of research, tons of time kind of crafting it, recrafting it, editing the craft, getting feedback, editing it some more. And so I think people have to realize that if you're going to put all this time and effort into this process, the worst thing I think you could do is forget all about it when you go into entrepreneurship. Like, well, did that, got the certificate or the plaque sitting on the wall, but then now I'm going to start brand new. Cause I always get upset when I get highly educated clients and they're like, well, I'm new to this. I'm like, how? How are you new to this thing? Because you have all these degrees, like all these years of experience, all this education you paid for. Then you come over to this new thing, right? This entrepreneurship thing, and you're like, well, I'm new. It's like, no, you're not. You have all these degrees, all this knowledge to pull from, all this life experience. So, before we hop into more entrepreneur stuff, tell me a little bit about how you personally kind of help people through the process we've been talking about so far.
Sure. Well, it's really interesting that you brought up the time element. People want to say, how quick can I get this done? And it depends on the time. Yes, you could get it done a lot quicker if you've got 40 hours a week, but if you don't know what you're doing during those 40 hours,
Okay.
then you go pretty slowly. And that's kind of where I come in. So a lot of the students that take on these degrees, they are, like you said, they're really driven. They've got all of these skills, they've got all of this experience, but they don't necessarily know that dissertation process. And a lot of institutions, once you get into a doctoral degree, assume that you know what you're doing because you're there. You're there, so you must know what you're doing. And of course, that doesn't follow. You know, you can have a ton of expertise running a small business, but none whatsoever of doing a lit review, because why would you? You know, where have you had to use that skill set before? So the institutions don't really give you the support. They don't really give you the knowledge. They don't really tell you this is what you should be doing and here's how you should be doing it. That's where I tend to step in, and so that people can actually use that time that they're devoting to their dissertation effectively, because they know what they're supposed to be doing. They've got somebody saying, yes, you did that right, or nope, I would suggest you go in this direction. And then also, you know, there's a lot of frustration that comes from that mismatch between what's expected and what you actually know. So I'm often a shoulder to cry on, or you know, someone to say, "Oh my goodness, that's terrible. You shouldn't be experiencing that. Here's what I would recommend you to get yourself out of that situation." So, kind of advisor, parent, teacher, like I fill all the blanks for these students just to try and get them from where they start with me to the end position where they've got their degree and they know how to move forward with it.
That's amazing. And I think something that I've said for years is that you truly need a coach in every aspect of your life. The idea that you can do it alone, it just is crazy to me, because you don't do anything alone. You know, when you're a baby, your parents take care of you. When you're, school age, your teachers are supporting you. When you get your first job, your supervisors are telling you, how to do things and how to get it right. So why, when you get to these higher levels, do people think, well, I'll just do it by myself? It's like, no, find somebody to support you. I love that you're a coach in this area, because a lot of people, when they think of coaches, they think, oh, a life coach or a business coach. But literally, for anything that has a goal associated to it, there can be a coach for
Coach.
it,
Yeah.
whether it's a wellness coach, a fitness coach, a trauma coach. I mean, the list goes on and on. There needs to be someone there to offer guidance and support. So I'm glad that you kind of bridge that gap between what is expected, like you said, versus like the reality of what do they know. And the thing that's true about people with dissertations that I've found is that this is like a huge age range. Like some people are traditional where they've just stayed in school forever. And so they're not super old, but they're like, they've been a life student. So they're not, necessarily middle age or what have you. But then some people have lived life, decided, hey, I want to up my game, I want to get this degree, and they've had kids, had families, been married, heck, been divorced, maybe even had grandkids, and then they're going back to get this next level of education. So it's really interesting as a coach that you kind of take care of that whole gambit. How do you handle that? Because I know for me, I have a very strict age range policy. I found that works best for me in my coaching business. But how do you juggle, dealing with people of different generations, maybe even different backgrounds? Because I think you do what, UK and US
I do.
students. So yeah, how do you juggle different cultures, different age groups, different backgrounds as you navigate being a coach for them?
To be honest, really, it's because the skill sets, the advice, the coping strategies pretty much stay the same. So I do have familiarity with both the UK and the US, and now Canada, from students that I've worked with as well. So knowing what they should expect is the first step, but then just being able to see through that kind of surface level of age or lifestyle or um, country or culture down to, okay, here's the actual problem you're having and here's the solution to it. And those solutions tend to be pretty straightforward. And like you said, there's a lot of crossover between business and coaching and dissertations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you have kind of moved your passion for supporting people in this very stressful process to a business. Because again, some people are sitting here thinking, like, well, I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't know what, like, I don't know what to have a business in. And you were like, well, hey, I know how to do dissertations and I've gone through the process. You probably helped a few people for free before you really got into it and started, selling your services. And it's like, this is it. This is something that there was a gap in the market. You saw it, you seized it, and now you are literally, like I said, bridging that gap. It's amazing. And I think some people overthink entrepreneurship where they're like, oh, I have to have this new idea, this new something. You're like, no, like the steps are straightforward. People just don't know it. So I'm here to tell them, like, these are the steps, hold them accountable, and then let them cry on my shoulder when it gets hard.
Yeah, pretty much. Like find the thing that you're good at, that you're an expert in, that you can help people with. That's all it really comes down to. What do people need that you can give them?
Yes. So I do want to ask because we don't tend to have, like I said, we've never had a dissertation coach on the pod before. How do you go about finding these people that are in need for your services? Because people always want to know, like, how do we market? I know a lot about marketing to a lot of industries, but hey, I've never been a dissertation coach. So how do you go about finding your target audience?
So I actually work with a business coach. First thing I said to him was like, how do I find people? Um, I get a lot of referrals. So that's, the first thing is you start with one student who needs help. And when you help them and you help them well, they pass you on to the next student. They are surrounded by other students who need help. So I would say probably 50% of my business comes in through referrals from people saying to somebody else, oh, I worked with this person and they really helped me and you should work with them too. And then I do run a Google ad. A really targeted ad that lets people know that I'm here and they could come and find me.
Look, ads ain't never hurt nobody. I like it. I
Very
like it.
straightforward. And obviously I do podcasts as well, so that people can hear about what I do and how I can help them. I spend a lot of time on Twitter. Just there's a lot of frustrated students on Twitter, and I try and spend a certain amount of time each week helping, answering their questions, kind of pointing them in the right direction. And sometimes they remember that I was the person who was able to do that, and they come back to me.
Awesome. And I think you kind of said something that I want to kind of dig deeper on, and the fact that you go to where your clients are, your target audience is. People always ask me like which social media platform they should be on. I always say pick the platform you love and then pick the platform your audience is on. Like I am not a fan of Twitter. People know, like you can see that I post there, but I do not engage. But that's because most of my audience is typically not on Twitter. I'm mostly on Facebook and LinkedIn because that's where my audience is. So I love that you're like, hey, they're frustrated. Twitter is the home of frustration. People are going to complain, gripe, moan, and you're like, well, I'm going to be here to hear that so that I can then offer support. And then, like you said, once you offer support, they're like, oh, she knows what she's talking about. Okay. And then they want to work with you more. So I think that's brilliant. Like I said, I love the idea of Google Ads, and then referrals are amazing. Oftentimes people forget to ask their current clients or past clients to refer them. And I'm like, you're missing out on that amazing lead opportunity. Because if you do a great job, people will want to talk about you. You just have to remind them and say, hey, if anybody else may need this, I can help you. And usually they do know people, especially in the academic space, because their friends are, maybe educators or professors or what have you. And they're all kind of on this same path together. And they're like, hey, such and such helped me. You need to work with her because she's going to get you to that next level. So I love great marketing strategy there. So let's talk a little bit about leveraging this degree. Now we have it. You've helped them. They're excited. How do I use it once I have it?
So I want to come back to this idea that we started with, that there is crossover between the structure of a dissertation and the structure of starting a new business. And that's for a very good reason, is that both are doing the same thing. Um, when we're actually putting together a lot of dissertation proposals, we talk about stakeholders. Who's going to care about this? How is this going to actually help someone or something? That doesn't go away just because you finished the dissertation. You still addressed a problem and developed expertise in the solution. And that's really your starting point for taking your dissertation or your PhD study, your doctoral study, and taking it towards a business idea. You've already identified a problem. You've already identified a target audience, which is the population that you studied and came up with solutions for. You already have expertise in what those solutions are. So now you need to start thinking about, okay, well, I've already presented this to my committee. This is there in a dissertation form, but now how can I take it out into the wider world? So that's kind of the first thing, is like, you can, right from the very beginning of the dissertation process, be thinking about it as also a business or marketable idea. You're looking for a problem and an audience in both situations, and there's no reason that they can't overlap. The
Oh, that's
other
amazing.
really key thing is that you are going to make connections while you're doing that dissertation. So there are going to be people that you have to speak to, that you collect data from, that you ask about the problem that they are having. So as you're developing your expertise, you're also getting that expertise by making connections to other people. And those connections are going to end up being either your next client or colleague, or they are the person who knows your next client or colleague. So you want to keep those connections live and working and build them deliberately.
That's amazing. I actually just recently heard a video. A guy was saying people used to say it's who you know, but it's more who knows you. So by actually developing those relationships, building the rapport with, like you said, potential clients, or I call them collaborators, people who are in this space that can help you get to the people you want to reach. That's really helping you in the process of moving your business forward. So really, you're laying all the groundwork. It seems like in the dissertation, and then once you're finished or once you're ready, you then can move it into more of a business space, maybe add in the branding elements, add in the marketing elements. But you've really had, you've made this really solid foundation for yourself with a little extra, because most people don't have the context. They haven't done all the market research yet, but you've done that, which is absolutely amazing. So I love this. All the pieces are just fitting nicely together.
Yeah.
So I do want to ask, because you do this day in and day out, what are some of the major struggles people have within the process, whether it's starting the business or just getting through the dissertation portion of their degree?
So I think the major struggle, and speaking personally, this applied to me when I was starting my business as well as every student that I've ever worked with. It's feeling like you should know what you're supposed to be doing, but you don't, and you don't know whether it's okay to ask for help, and if it is, which bits is it okay to ask for help on, and where do you go to get that help, and how do you know when you don't need help anymore, and how do you know which bits you should be doing by yourself? So I think it's really important to find the people and find the tools that you need early on. Throw away this idea that it's not okay to ask for help. Accept that you're moving into a space where you don't know everything, and it's okay to not know everything, but you got to go in and find those tools and find those people. So in a dissertation, that might be something as simple as recognizing that your supervisor's job is to support you and setting up with them early on, a schedule for when they're going to give you feedback, or a communication protocol, or whatever it might be, to make sure you're getting the best of their time. Or it might be recognizing that you are not the strongest when it comes to commas and capital letters, and saying, right off, I'm going to budget to make sure I've got a proofreader for my final draft. It might be that you suddenly realize you don't know what a literature review is, and that you need a coach and someone who can say, okay, this looks strong enough, this doesn't, here's how you find good sources. Maybe recognizing that you are not the best at managing your time, because you are also trying to run a business and be a parent and be an employee. And so, okay, you need a coach there who's going to help you set some goals for the week and keep you accountable and keep you, focused on what you're supposed to be doing. So assess your own strengths, assess your weaknesses, and reach out for the help that you need. Like, find the tools and find the people. I think that is the top tip for the top challenge, because the top challenge is not knowing what you're supposed to be doing.
Wow, that makes perfect sense. It's funny because, like I said, so much of this is very mirroring how we handle people starting businesses. And you're doing the same thing in the dissertation space, because one of the first steps we do in my business practice is we do a SWOT analysis. And so we do, like you said, analyzing your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Because sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you really sit down and say, okay, these are the things I know are my strong areas. Maybe grammar is strong for me. Maybe I'm very passionate about this topic, but then you go on the other side and say, well, I'm not super great at time management or, I tend to procrastinate or what have you. And then being able to take that to a supervisor, take that to a coach. People are always asking me, like, how do you optimize working with a coach? Well, you come ready. You need to know what you need help on. While coaches have their own way of getting you from point A to point B, they also need to know, what are you struggling with? Because you're an individual, you're going to be different from the next person. What do you feel like are your weaknesses, and how can we help you kind of bridge that gap or overcome those weaknesses and make those your strengths, or be that support in that area, or get you additional support in that area. And so I think some people, like you said, are kind of afraid to look dumb. Like, they're like, oh, I don't want to ask a dumb question. But it's like, no, there's no dumb question except not to ask, because closed mouths don't get fed. You have to put yourself out there so that they can know how to support you. I tell people, you don't lie to your doctor, you don't lie to your therapist, you don't lie to your coach. Because
Right.
people will try to pretend like, oh yeah, I got it, cool. You're telling them go do this part, and they're like, yeah, I got it. Then they go home like, I have no clue how to do this. Like, you paid for this person to help you. Tell them you don't know how to do this so they can give you the resources. It's so nerve wracking as a coach when people do that. It's like, why you ain't just tell me you didn't know? We could have broke that down. I could have gave you a resource. But they're like, I didn't want to look crazy. It's like, now we both look crazy because it's not done. So yeah, I love that you kind of said like, just let me know, and you work on it from there. So we're running out of time, but I always like to ask if you have any final thoughts. And then, of course, let people know, because people are like, okay, that's my next step in my journey. I want to get this dissertation done. So let them also know, one, your final thoughts, but also how can they connect with you?
Sure. So final thought is very definitely find your people. Find whoever it is that you need who's going to support you throughout your journey. And I always make an offer for anybody who's listening when we do a podcast and people want to reach out and get help. So if you're a grad student and you're struggling with any of the challenges that we've been talking about today, if you email me, which is jen@readwriteperfect.com, and you mention that you heard me on this podcast, I always do a free session with anybody who does that so that we can get at least one problem off of their plate. So that's one way to reach out to me and get some help. And then if you want to find me, you can find me on my website, which is www.readwriteperfect.com. And you can also find me on Twitter. I am at perfect_right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. This is definitely a fun topic, because we don't always have, like I said, somebody who comes from your lane to come talk with our audience. But I think if nothing else, even if you're going to write a dissertation or not, you understand the importance of a coach, how to utilize that coach, and then how to use what you already know, right? Take from your background, take from your experience, take from your education, and then move it into entrepreneurship. Do not leave those experiences behind. And if you enjoyed this talk today, I encourage you to go back and watch some of our previous episodes. And remember that we drop a new episode each and every week. And with that being said, guys, remember, I rock, you rock, we all rock, and we will see you next episode.